My name is Juan Francisco, and I'm a psychic medium and tarot card reader. I've always been curious about the supernatural, the paranormal, and psychic abilities, and I'm here to share my stories and interview folks who want to share their own stories with us. Let's get to it. Aly Kravetz, aka BronxWitch, is the founder and owner of BronxWitch Headquarters, a co-working space for spiritual practitioners located in the Bronx in New York City. Born and raised in the South Bronx, Aly began her magical practice over 2 decades ago when she picked up her first tarot deck at the age of 15. She pivoted from a pursuit of a career in law to bartending to being a manager in New York's hospitality industry to becoming a full-time reader, teacher, and business coach, harnessing her experience of witchcraft, tarot, and energy healing. Today, her goal as a business owner and coach is to create safe spaces for her community. We're talking to Aly today on Third Eyesight. Aly, good to have you on Third Eyesight. Thanks for hopping on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you.
Of course, and same to you. And I was saying, Aly and I were talking before I hit record. We've been following each other on Instagram for a little bit. I think we have some mutuals. Maybe we'll get into it. But first, tell us where you're based and tell us about the work that you do.
Yeah, well, I am Aly Kravetz. I am known as the Bronx Witch, or at least that's what I call myself. Born and raised Bronxite. I have been on my magical journey for a little bit longer than most my age. I'm 38 now, but I got started with an interest in witchcraft at 12 and self-dedicated to Wicca at 14. Picked up my first tarot deck at 15. And I am now the owner of BronxWitch Headquarters, which is the only co-working space dedicated to witches in all of New York City. And I am the CEO of Better Witch Coaching, which is a coaching platform that helps baby witches to become better witches. And I do that through classes and coaching on everything from magic to spiritual entrepreneurship.
I love it. And I'm definitely going to ask you more about BronxWitch Headquarters in a little bit. I would love to hear more about. You said you started at a pretty early age engaging with witchcraft and Wicca. I would love to hear more about how you came across those practices and how your journey started for you.
Yeah, well, thank God for TV and the internet, right? Bringing us like out of the dark ages. But I was just one of those really inquisitive kids. I grew up in a Christian household and was in church every Sunday, every Saturday, was in the choir and the YPD, and my mom was on church boards and things like that. So church was life. If I wasn't in school, then it was a church sanctioned activity. I was just one of those kids that had questions about what I was being told. I was definitely, one of those annoying kids with the why. I wanted to understand why we were doing certain things, and in particular, the things that I didn't like. Having to wear dresses, I was going through a tomboy phase at the time, discovering my bisexuality. I did not want to be in frilly dresses and socks, and little shoes. Like I wanted to wear like a pantsuit and, comfortable clothing. And I didn't understand what it was about like loving God that required that I wear, nylon tights in the summertime. Like I just didn't understand why Jesus cared about my tights. So I asked questions like that, very practical, just sort of like, where in the Bible does it say I have to dress like this? Where in the Bible does it say that I can't say these words or that I'm supposed to do this or that? And my mom didn't have a lot of answers, so she would usually defer me to the Sunday school teachers. Shout out to Miss Washington, Miss Livingston. They took the brunt of these questions, and they didn't have good answers either, but I really appreciate the way that they answered because it helped me to understand what was happening quickly. And they basically just said like, because, these are the rules. So like stop interrupting Sunday school and just do it. And I'm so grateful they responded that way because it made me realize like, oh, these are just things that you guys do. Like there's no like divine cosmic, appointment that I do these things. This is what you guys do. And other people probably do different things. And that made me wonder what other people did. And there was a show on TV at the time called Charmed. that just really was empowering from like a feminine perspective. This was definitely on the tail end of like a really big rise in Wicca and goddess worship in general becoming like a more understood thing. European occultism kind of enjoying a moment of popularity, and then my middle school got a computer lab, and now I could actually like ask these questions. The TV never spoke back, so I had to just watch, but the computer talked back. And so I was able to ask questions there, and I learned about Wicca and had this sort of aha moment of, oh, that's more like what I think is going on. I kind of like the way they phrase it, and that's just been my journey ever since. And I've just never found a reason to really align myself with any other religion, um, because I had that very early realization that religion is just a thing we choose to do. It's no higher than that, and shouldn't be taken really any more seriously than that. It's something you choose to do if it makes your life better. And being Wiccan makes my life better. So I just keep doing it.
I love it. And I was talking to another podcast guest the other day who called it, she said that it's healthy to have what she coined, and maybe she didn't coin it, maybe she got it from somewhere else, but divine suspicion. And we start talking about that childlike mentality of asking why. It's healthy. Like it's a healthy thing to ask why. And so I was also that kid. I grew up Catholic and asking like, well, why do we have to go to confession to feel forgiven, to take the host? It's like all these steps. And I mean with religion there's so much intersected like misogyny, and there's so many intersections there that we can go into for another episode. But I would love to hear next because you talked about your journey, your introduction, your life to. I love also like computer, like the computers coming to school. I love how all that intersected and how you learned more about it that way. And Charmed, you're not the first person to say that Charmed got them into witchcraft. um,
It's terrible because like all the satanic panic parents are going to be like, see, it's the television shows and the movies with the demons. And it's like, no, I most certainly would have ended up in this place somehow. But that was just a catalyst for opening conversation about like everything you've told me about witchcraft is evil, but this pop culture depiction is something different. Let me explore.
and I'm sorry, but Jesus turned water into wine. If that isn't witchy, I don't know what is.
I mean, I say it all the time, and a lot of witches do that. Jesus was one of our most proficient magicians. But the argument from the Christians that I've gotten in response to that is that everything that Jesus did was in the name of the Father, like Christ, God's Father, the God of the Bible, not sorcery. I struggle to see the distinction, but for
Yeah,
them, it's a difference, I guess.
I think Jesus was also an incredible medium, and so yeah, there's so many takes on it. But with you talked about your introduction to witchcraft and Wicca, and the way I interpret what Bronx Witch Headquarters, what one of its missions is to foster that space for other witches. And it sounds to me like a great place for witches to go to if they're just starting to explore this world. So could you describe more about your mission behind Bronx Witch Headquarters and what you would love to continue getting out of that?
Yeah, so the motivation to open up had a lot to do with COVID, aligning with my own certification in Reiki healing and needing a place in order to offer those services right at a time when, the world was shutting down, and coming together in open spaces wasn't as easy. And a lot of spas were closing, a lot of wellness centers were closing, things of that nature. And the idea of having people in my home also didn't seem like the best idea. And so I did something called a sadhana. For me, that's basically just an opportunity to fast and detox and really kind of disconnect. And I thought that I was going to be kind of hanging up my witchy hat from like the professional world. It was like it's time to get real and go back to bartending or, something like that. And instead, at the end of those 40 days, not only did I not shut down the tarot readings and candles and things I was doing, but I had now a physical location that I just signed a lease on. It really all was very serendipitous and happened very fast. And when I first opened, my goal was just to have an office for myself, to be able to make candles and teas, take readings, and do Reiki sessions. And I quickly realized that I was not given this space just for myself, that it was intended to be more of a community space. And so I started letting people know that they could use this space if they needed it. I transitioned into offering retail after a while because that was a common request. Folks would come in for a Reiki session, and I might make a recommendation of a crystal or an herb that they could continue working with. And the question was always, do you have this? And I was like, well, no. And then I was like, why don't I? So I started from like a little corner of like old pictures. It's really kind of cute, like a little bookshelf in the corner that expanded to an entire room. And I think the thing I'm the most proud of with HQ is the safety that people feel when they come there. We're a safe space designated by the Safe Space Alliance, which is an LGBTQ plus group that basically certifies businesses as taking an active stance against hate speech, against discrimination, making an effort to have non-gendered bathrooms and things of this nature. And that really matters a lot to me as a queer person and someone who feels very much like a protective guardian of the communities that I'm a part of. So the response from people has always been how safe it's been there. When people would come in for retail, they almost always would have more questions, right? Because we kind of get into the craft sometimes just like for the stuff, because it's got like really great stuff. And so people would come along and they want to buy stuff, and then they realize they don't really know how to use this stuff. And I found myself giving sort of, 30-minute, 45-minute impromptu classes. And I realized that that wasn't really sustainable and wasn't serving people the best. So we launched the HQ online portal, which is a virtual space with classes, on-demand classes on everything from crystal healing to meditation to spiritual entrepreneurship. And that's a place that we can send people. We have a coven community on Discord where people can connect and hang out. And we've moved away from retail, and now we're fully a co-working space for practitioners, whether they just need a place to get some reading in or practice their tarot, or they, actually have clients and things like that. It's really for anybody that needs the space. And that transition has been really important because we don't necessarily need more shopping experiences, even though the South Bronx is lacking in that. What we really need is something that sociologists, urban planners, etc., would call third spaces. These are places that are not the local clinic, that are not the supermarket, they're not your apartment housing. They don't serve the necessities necessarily of the community. But what they do provide is a place for members of the community to actually thrive and grow, to connect, to network, to find resources. And the South Bronx is the type of place where folks like me, folks who maybe are bright kids or show some type of promise, are told to leave. We're told, get to Manhattan, get to Brooklyn, and then get to a private college and get out of New York entirely. And that leaves the neighborhood depleted. And I want to fix that. I want there to be places where people who want to make a greater impact in the world don't have to leave their homes in order to do so. That they have spaces where they can gather, where they can connect, where they can unite, and rather than being pushed out of these areas. Because when that happens, we experience something called brain drain, where the brightest minds in the neighborhood are pushed away. And so we're literally left with a place where you don't have a lot of folks that have the capacity to think of solutions, to some of the problems that we have. And so the problems just persist. And so we need our bright minds to stay in the Bronx. We need people who have great ideas to stay here. We need people who are spiritual, who have other alternative forms of medicine, of healing, to stay here. So that when people need that, we don't have to go to Brooklyn. We don't have to go to Costa Rica. We don't, so we bring that here. I host a retreat called the Staycation Retreat at the end of October, very intentionally called the Staycation, and it takes place in the Bronx. And the point of it is to help people realize that we don't have to leave where we are for these things. We just have to make the concerted effort to stay here and build these things here. So that's kind of the overall mission. It goes a little beyond just being a place where people can learn about the craft, but certainly it is a great starting place for folks. Come to an event or check out our directory and connect with one of the witches that uses our space.
I was going to ask you what it's like to build a presence like this in New York City, because I do feel like when I first heard about your business a couple years ago, I thought this is brilliant, this is awesome, and to have that in the Bronx borough. And based on my understanding, I've noticed that it's very important also when people see themselves in people like you in their community too. And so this is such powerful work. So thanks for sharing about that. And yeah, may I ask you just like tangentially, a little side question, like what has it been like for you? Because when people think, this is my perception,
Mhm.
that I think when people hear like New York City metaphysics practitioners, they have a certain picture in mind, and I feel like so much of it in this city is very Instagrammable. It's about being Instagrammable and having a certain type of facade or certain type of reputation. And I've noticed that people like you who really want to build community and make that the priority, it's not as praised as it should be. And I want to ask you how that lands with you, me saying that, and me asking you, like, how has it been to build a business like this in New York City for you?
Yeah, I definitely think, for the internet, you kind of get sort of two sort of aesthetics, I think, of witchcraft in general, that relate to the different communities in New York. I think you get sort of like the European version of, someone with like lots of dried herbs hanging in their apartment and lots of plants and things. Um, and then you get a more African diasporic, more Caribbean influenced practice because New York does have uh, several large communities from the Caribbean and from Africa. And so some of those practices are visible. We have quite a number, especially in the Bronx, where we have a very strong Latin community up from different origins. We have botanicas in every little nook and neighborhood. And if you go out to Brooklyn or you go to Harlem, you're going to find a lot of African shops selling herb bundles and cowrie shells and some of the things that you might experience or be looking for if you're interested in hoodoo or santeria, voodoo, things of that nature. So you usually get those two pictures for me. That's like what I think of in New York because you don't. There's obviously other aesthetics of like the craft, but they don't apply in like the urban environment that we have. So I think you get those two views. What you don't get is sort of a more eclectic, casual, um, urban, like of the city type of an origin. Like both of those pictures of practitioners are people that are bringing practices into New York. So they're bringing them from the Caribbean or they're bringing them from Europe. And they're bringing them into New York with them. You don't see a lot of like what it looks like for somebody who is a craft practitioner who is of New York and not bringing something from outside of it. And so I think it's important that I exist, I guess. It's important we all exist, but I guess it's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's important that I exist for the New Yorker, for the New York witch, for somebody that doesn't necessarily have a tie to any of these, like maybe more indigenous or more exotic looks of the craft. That like the witch that you know the most about could be like pushing her shopping cart like to the supermarket, like she's not wearing like long flowy black clothing like you'd find in the more gentrified areas of Brooklyn, like, but she's also not like a giant mound of dreads covered in beads and like patterns from the Caribbean. Like she's just kind of a New Yorker, like very much just like a New Yorker. um and I think that's important because New York is not a place that people think of first when they think about witchcraft. I don't think. I think they maybe think like people can get away with it here because we're a more liberal place and you can kind of just be free and be more of yourself and be accepted or at least left alone in New York. But I don't think that people necessarily think of having deep ties to anything if you are someone who's actually born and raised in New York. And that's actually very much a misconception, because if you look at the history of New York, particularly during the Renaissance, the 20s and 30s, there was a huge wave of people migrating from the South, from the Caribbean, bringing their practices here and really infusing them into like New York's way of life. And so New York became known for the speakeasies and the jazz clubs and the churches, the little sort of storefront churches on every block. And in all of those places, there were spiritualists holding seances and doing tarot readings and reading palms and coffee. And New York actually had things called tea rooms, which is where you could go and get a cup of tea, but also have your tea leaves read. Um, and this was just a part of New York, like the coffee and the bagel. And those parts of New York have kind of faded away as New York has shifted. And we're now left with a city that doesn't really seem to be necessarily very magical, certainly not very spiritual. But the beginnings of the city as we know it actually was created by people that were very steeped in spiritual practices of all different kinds. So I'm kind of in my way trying to help people to understand that maybe that you don't need to go outside of New York. You don't need to go outside of the Bronx to be connected to like a really deep history of magical practitioners.
Yeah, and you are continuing that legacy. And yeah, how cool. I find what you're doing so important. And I know many others think the same way. I want to shift gears to your role as a business coach because I've seen some of your Instagram lives and they're very great. I got some really great pointers watching them myself. I'm really being legit, like no lie, I have. I now have SMART goals thanks to you, for real. Uh,
Yes, it's good. It's
um,
good.
I want to ask you what do you notice being the biggest mistake or a miss that practitioners make when they're running their businesses that you're like, this is one thing that let's get clear about this. Let's not miss this.
For sure. It is, ooh, can I have a tie? Can I
Yeah,
have
absolutely. Yeah.
I have two that I think compete with each other, and I think that they're related in a little bit. The first, I think, is spiritual practitioners don't think about business. They don't. There seems to be sort of like an aversion almost, um, where the more spiritual you are, it's almost like, okay, well, the more legit and authentic I am as a spiritual provider, then the more like anti-business I should be, the more anti-money, the more anti-capitalism I should be. And I think that that's a huge mistake, because I think that even if you are trying to eradicate a system completely, you need to understand it or you'll never be successful. So your goal as a spiritual practitioner might ultimately be to bring in a world that is completely free of capitalist trappings. But if you don't get capitalism, you're just going to be somebody on the internet screaming about all the things that make you angry and broke. You have to understand your opponent. And that is the only way to defeat them or get what you want from them. And I don't think that spiritual practitioners think about that enough. I think that we should be spending as much time in webinars and conferences with CEOs and millionaires as we are at our altars and visiting the graves of our ancestors. Um, we have to be well-rounded in order to rise to the occasion. So I would say that's one critical mistake is thinking that you can just be so spiritual that you will be able to sustain yourself without understanding how money works, how finances work, how taxes work, how business formation works, etc. Um, and then I think the other thing which goes kind of with that is not addressing your mindset and developing things like discipline and personal responsibility, an organized calendar, a schedule, routines, um, the things that we see people who are successful in like a monetary way. And we think like, oh, what hustle culture? Oh, how oppressive. But the reality is that building anything requires really methodical um, thought and action. And if you are not methodical in your thoughts and your actions, you are not going to build something that is. Anything you try to create is going to be as scattered, as disorganized, as haphazard, as lazy as you are. So realizing that if you want to turn your spiritual gifts into a business that can really make an impact in people's lives, um, first and foremost in your own, that you are going to have to develop the same skills as anybody else looking to turn an idea into a living, breathing thing.
Yeah, I remember when I first launched my business, I felt so bad about charging for readings.
Mhm.
And it seems to be a very common experience amongst, especially I'm talking more about psychic readers um and like how much to charge. And then I would see like some people charging 600 for 1 hour and they started 2 years ago. I'm like, well, if they can charge 600, I can charge 75 just to start, I guess. And I think getting past that, yeah, there's this idea that because we are doing good and healing work that we can't be compensated for the energy we put into it. And I love what you said about we want to dismantle these systems in place, but the best way to dismantle them is to use them to our benefit to then bring about what we can to help dismantle it. Yeah, it's like work like an inside job sort
Yeah.
of.
Well, and
Yeah.
just to like to understand it, you're not going to take apart a car engine if you have no idea how a car engine is put together. And so you don't have to, you can decide that you're going to ride a bicycle for the rest of your life and that you're never going to subscribe to the car lifestyle. But if getting rid of cars is your plan, if you feel like they really are a danger and a harm to our society, understanding how one works is going to be the first step to pulling it apart and undoing it. So whether you want to benefit from our current situation or you want to burn it to the ground, neither approach is going to happen if you don't understand what it is you're dealing with.
Yeah, and also what you said about putting in the work. I think when I first enter, I've always been a spiritual person, a spiritual kid, but I think I had my one of many probably to come awakenings during COVID, as many people did, and learned very quickly about law of attraction. And I think in my opinion, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. It's become quite easy for some people to rely on that as, set the intention, then just like it'll come to you. And I think there's a lot to be said about setting intention. I think it's very important. But then as the Bible would say, like faith without works is dead. Like put in the intention, but then also do your part. I always call us like we're co-pilots with the universe. We are
Mhm.
not. It's not all in the universe. It's not all on us. We worked in tandem with the universe,
Mhm.
um, and yeah, I that's what that reminded me of because it's something I used to hear a lot. I used to listen to a lot of Abraham Hicks, and not to
Mhm.
trash anything about Abraham Hicks, a lot of valuable stuff there. But I got very used to hearing just you don't have to do anything, just let
Right.
it come to you. So
So
I
true.
find what you said very important. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is I think that the laws of attraction, I approach my craft in what I call a very scientific way. I'm not a very fantastical or woo-woo person at all. What I find is that magic is merely a expression of all of the laws of science that we have established in the physical world, just applied to the energetic world. And the disconnect is just that scientists and science, the science community, is just very hesitant to lend any credit to something that they cannot see or quantify. So they're just not willing to go there and say that the same way we have gravity that impacts a physical object on Earth, we also have gravity that impacts energy. They're just not willing to go that far. For me, I just allow myself to go that far and say, well, but what if? What if all of the same principles that apply in our physical world also apply in an unseen world that kind of exists around us? Then what? If we apply those same principles, then we will find that, yes, absolutely, the law of attraction would make perfect sense. In the physical world, we know that like attracts like. We know that a bead of water will bore through feet of granite to get to another body of water. Um, and so we know that things that are like each other in the physical world will seek each other out and will come together. And so if we, just for the sake of it, assume that the premise exists also in the energetic, then that would hold that if you have a certain makeup, you will attract things towards you energetically that have a similar makeup. And that is the part about the law of attraction that I think people get. But then the part where people fall off maybe is that now you have to get on to the frequency of the thing that you want. That's the part that requires work because you're probably not on that frequency. Otherwise, you'd have the thing, right? So if your goal is to be famous, and you want to attract more famous people around you, you want more notoriety, you want more eyes on you, you can set the intention to attract that. But then the work that you have to do is to put yourself into the vibration of fame and notoriety, which might mean you need to do things like address how you look, be prepared to be seen all the time. If you wake up every day and you don't do your hair, you don't put on any makeup or put on a nice outfit, is that in alignment with somebody who gets seen on camera every day, who has paparazzi outside their door, who has, the general public scrutinizing everything that they wear? Probably not. So that's where the work part comes in. So you are still very much using the principle, and you are, in fact, attracting things to you. And you may not have to do work like go and get the fame, right? You don't have to go and like try to call all the famous people or try to, you do it on yourself. You work on yourself. You put yourself into that frequency. You treat yourself like you're Michael Jackson. When you wake up in the morning, if you're famous, how does the famous version of you live their life? How do they live their day? By the way, random, but a fun exercise for folks who like to marry tech into their magic. AI is a very helpful tool for visualizing and like helping you shift your energy. The prompt that I saw someone use, I totally ripped this off. I wish I remember who I saw post about it, but I am going to post about it at some point and pretend like it was my idea. But basically, you start off by writing scripting about the future version of you. when I did this, it turns out that it just so happened I'd already done this. I had done something similar in a journal. I had seen somewhere that you should free write for 5 to 10 minutes, pretending that you are somebody bumping into you 5 years from now. So a random stranger runs into you 5 years from now. Let them talk for like 10 straight minutes. What would they say? What did you look like? What did you smell like? How did you greet them? What were
I
you
love
doing?
that.
Yeah, it was really cool. It really helped me to look at my like future self through the eyes of somebody else. What are the things I would want someone to say about me? Was she kind? Was she doing something important? You know, how did people respond to her? Did they respect her? So that was cool. And I had done that some time ago and it was just like in a journal. So then I saw this AI thing and I was like, oh, let me go get that journal entry. But basically you want to take a story of you 5 years from now and feed it to ChatGPT. And then tell ChatGPT to create a 5 minute story about a day in the life of that person.
That is so cool. I
I
saw
just
this going mini viral. People were doing this and they were posting it on Instagram, I think.
Mhm.
And it's been on my list to try that because I use ChatGPT for like more like social media marketing needs. Um, but that is really cool, and I really want to try it. And it
It
shows that
brought tears to my eyes.
yeah,
It
I
brought
can only
tears to my
imagine.
eyes. It was unbelievable. I was like, oh my gosh. And then what that did was it gave me a game plan for how to actually be in the frequency of what I wanted to be. Because that person woke up in the morning and went for a run and had like a green smoothie. And I was like, well, shit, that's not
Time to
happening.
wake up, baby. You
So
get your
maybe I need
smoothie.
to start doing that, right? Like this person had certain things that they did through their day that I did not do. And so that's where the work is. And there's something that you had said a moment ago where you said we're co-creating with the universe. I completely agree. But the way that I visualize that or think about that concept and what I teach to my Better Witch Magic intensive students is that when we are born, imagine that there's someone standing on a beach in front of an infinite ocean. And that infinite ocean is the universe, all that can be and all that cannot be, the all thing, the nothing, all of it. And somebody takes a red solo cup and scoops out of that ocean. That's you. You're in the cup. And we tend to identify with the cup. And we forget that inside of us is the ocean, that we are actually not different from the ocean. So when we say we're co-creating with the universe, for me, it's really that I am the universe. So I don't even know if I can call it co-creation. We're just creating. I am the universe. But because we so often focus on the physical, our body, and our limitations, we forget that we're a part of something huge and that all of what is in that cosmic ocean, all of the possibilities, every single scenario is also in the cup. Every cell, every little molecule that was in that big ocean is also in the cup in a far smaller quantity, but it's still in there. And that means any possibility for what you want in your life is already inside of you.
That's gorgeous. I'm gonna steal that and say
Please
that to
do.
share with other people.
I'm pretty sure I stole the cup thing from someone else too. It's hard to keep track of like what the internet teaches you. I try to be good about crediting people all the time, but half the time the thing you saw, if that person wasn't the first person to say it. So shout out to whoever first, came up with the cup in the ocean analogy. But now
We do
I've
our best.
I've added like a bunch of layers to it. So I feel like it's my own. And then I have a whole theory about how the person who's actually scooping the cup is your higher self.
Wow. Well, I've heard the analogy of how we are all wave crests in the ocean, and a wave, or like when you can't see the forest for the trees, like we're all part of this big forest where each trees, we're all part of one thing. And I love like what you were saying. If I can paraphrase you, it's like we are all expressions of the universe, and
Yeah.
I just love that. I'm obsessed. Oof. I'm gonna remember that for a long time. I'm gonna
It's
start
like
thinking
taking
about
a
that.
slice of a pie. Like it's a
Hmm.
different slice, but the ingredients are all the same in each one. And maybe one slice has got like more crust than apple or whatever, but that we've all got it. And because we're not paying attention to that, it makes it seem like the things we want are so far away. They're over back in the ocean, but they're actually a lot closer. They're what you are made out of.
Mind blown. That's a beautiful analogy. So, what a great way to now go on to our last question. I want to ask you, what would you tell? I had another question originally, but I want to switch it up. What would you tell somebody who wants to delve into witchcraft? They're curious about it and they don't know where to start, or they just want to hear something empowering as they are delving into this new world for them.
Mm. Um, I think that I would start by saying it's all made up. Everything you've ever been told is made up. So take a deep breath and relax. Um, that no religion, no practice um, was ever given to us by any divine being. That all of the things that we currently do in order to feel more powerful, more connected, more at peace are all things that somebody made up because it worked for them. And it's great if those things also work for you, but they might not. And it is okay to search for the thing that works for you, even if other people don't understand it or agree with it. Um, I try to be very results driven. I don't like the idea of like practicing the craft just like for the good feels. It needs to work for me. I want to see results. And I want everyone to also see results. Whatever allows you to have the type of life that you want, the peace and the happiness and the good health that you seek, whatever allows you to be a happy, healthy, whole being, whatever gives you results, that's the thing you should do. If being in church every Sunday gives you results, do that. If leaving and never going back gives you results, do that. And if witchcraft gives you results, then do that. And if it doesn't, don't do it.
When you said that it's if I remember heard you correctly, it's not always about just having the good feels. There's something deeper that is important to seek there. And I don't practice the craft, but something that totally resonates when you said that is when I started my psychic mediumship journey, I think I use it at first as a way to bypass some of my personal healing struggles. And then I learned through a mentor, have the help of a mentor here in New York City. Um, that no, I need to address like that inner child, little Juan. I need to not run away from my problems through helping other people,
Yeah.
face my challenges in that healing journey and embrace it, and it actually made my practice better.
Yeah.
So yeah, that really resonates with me. And yeah, do you find that some people, again, I'm not as familiar with the craft, and I don't know as many people who practice it, but do you find that bypassing is something that occurs?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think well, first of all, there's just like again the stuff, right? So sometimes it's just like it's nice to be surrounded by these things, like candles everywhere. But I find folks that are dealing with a lot of religious trauma will sometimes flee and run to either spirituality or witchcraft or both as a way of escaping a place that is traumatizing, that wasn't good to them, that was oppressive. But it's like being in any other type of abusive relationship. If you were being abused, God forbid, for years and then you left, just leaving the relationship is probably not going to be enough. There's going to need to be some healing and some repair work that you have to do in order to be able to live your life in a way where you're not just making decisions in response to the trauma that you experience. So you're making decisions free of it. If you get hit in the face enough times, you're going to start flinching. If someone stops hitting you, that's great. But the moment someone goes to hit you or move in your direction, even if it's to give you a hug, you're going to flinch. So being away from the person that hits you is step one, but then you need to do some healing so that when someone comes to hug you, you're not flinching and running away, thinking that you're about to be hit. You have to kind of go back to that place where and it's scary because you're opening yourself up to maybe be hit again, but you have to heal from that in order to be open to potentially being hugged. And so is the case with religious trauma. People have been assaulted essentially by some really oppressive religions or communities that practice certain religions, and then they run away. And they're no longer, being bombarded every day, but they're responding in their lives in the same way. So they might go and get caught up in a cult, or start, giving do worship to a human person or something like that, things that they were taught to do in the oppressive, abusive religious relationship that they never healed from. And so now they're doing the same thing, just in a different space. And so I find that people can do that quite a bit, where they don't really allow spirituality or the craft to be results in their lives. Instead, they use it as like a thing to escape from the thing that was hurting them. But whenever I have the opportunity to talk to anybody that I think might be going through this, I come back to the results question. Because if you're using the craft or spirituality as just like a band-aid, or an escape mechanism from dealing with stuff, most likely you are not doing it or approaching it in a way that's going to have results for you. So you're just doing stuff to distract yourself, basically, and make yourself feel better. But nothing happens when you light that candle. Nothing consistent happens when you cast those spells. You're just sort of throwing things in the air and hoping for the best. When you actually face what you have been through and explore the craft or explore spirituality from that perspective, then you start actually seeing results. It's not just a distraction.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we end, I just want to tell you, you have such a great way of taking concepts and making them so digestible. And I want you to share with folks how they can learn more about you, get more of this,
Yeah.
and also any programs you have coming up or anything exciting you want to share about. Yeah, let people know
Yeah.
where to find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I do believe that's one of the tools in my toolkit, that makes me, I'd like to think, a good teacher. And I really enjoy teaching, so I'm excited to share with folks at the fifth semester of the Better Witch Magic Intensive kicks off in the fall, or in the spring rather. We're in the fall semester right now. I call it Hogwarts in the Hood, but I offer it, not officially because I'm not licensed to use that word. But I offer a 6 month coaching class and coaching program for baby witches that want to become better witches, that want to really get serious and see results in their craft. I offer it twice a year. It's a 6 month long program. I do a fall and a spring semester. Fall semester is halfway through right now, and the spring semester will start at the end of February. I will be offering a free webinar on December 8th called 10 Steps to Becoming a Better Witch, that breaks down my approach to how you can actually start seeing the results that you want, from practicing the craft and really understanding it. And I introduce those concepts in that webinar. So that would be a great place for people to come learn more, and get an idea of whether or not enrolling in the spring semester is something that they would be interested in. Registration for that webinar isn't available just yet. I think it will be in the next week or so. But the best way to stay in touch with that type of information, is to join our virtual coven. The Coven community is a non-denominational virtual space. There's no high priestess, though I am there. I'm referred to as the head witch. We have Alexis, who is the online portal administrator and the moderator in the Coven. The Coven's a great place. It's on Discord. We have a book club. We have a support group for Witches of Color. Specifically, we meet every month. I do something called High Tea Live. We have a little herbs, sip a little herbs. We talk about magic. Alexis does something every month called Moonlit Metaphysics on the full moon. She talks about astrology and numerology. So it's a fun space and a great place to connect with other witches like you virtually. And that's where we announce upcoming classes and things first. So you would want to go to BronxWitch.com and just click on classes. That'll take you into the portal and give you all the instructions on how to take our classes and how to become a part of the coven.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, so great to talk to you, Aly. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This was incredible. I really appreciate you. I thank you for all the work that you're doing. And I'm really grateful that you would, spotlight me and let me share some of my thoughts on these topics with your audience. I appreciate it.
Look, gotta support local, gotta support a fellow local. Gotta
Witches
do it.
helping witches. So is what I say.
Thank you, Aly.
Absolutely.
If you have a question or topic you want me to cover on Third Eyesight, head to my website, juanfranciscospirit.com/contact, and send a message my way. If you really enjoyed this episode, leave a review wherever you listen. I'd really appreciate it.